Hi there. Thank you for watching another AI voice video. This is Royzan. In this video, we will briefly discuss the Cisco router and a switch. Now you will ask why we have to discuss the router switch while we talk about Cisco IP PBX system. The reason is Cisco IP PBX is comprised of Cisco router and a switch. So we have to have a basic understanding of the Cisco router switch in order for us to move on to configure and update, set up the IP PBX system. Now let's have a look at the physical devices. We will see on the top, this is actually Cisco 2800 router. You will see there's embedded fast Ethernet port FA00, FA01. And we also have this is actually the console port for connection to your laptop PC to access to the console. Then we have another 4 slots. Those slots actually ready to connect to Cisco's external modules. On this router, we have the slot 1 with E1 connectors. You probably won't be see very clear. This is actually E1 for connect to ISDM line. Now next one is Cisco serial port. This is connect to the WAN link, and that's another available one. The bottom one is Cisco 3550 PoE switch. This actually had 24 ports. Most Cisco switches come with 24 or 48. There's actually some small Cisco routers come with port 8, but most likely you probably want to get a 24 or even 48 ports for the network. Now we know what is a Cisco router switch, but what's the role they play in a network? In order to know the role, different role the router switch play in the network in our IP PBX system, we actually have to discuss the IP address and the subnet. When we talk IP address, we know 192.168.16.2, that's a one IP address. 172.16.21.3, this is another IP address. Now this IP address actually includes 2 sections. One is network address, another is the device address. How do you know this network address? How the device know this network address? 192.168.16 is a device address, because we also provide another range number we call subnet mask. 255.255.255. Normally that looks like that, and for this range are same, 255.255.255.0. that's a subnet mask. What that means, 255 for this section is actually for network. 255 for this section is just for network, and the 0 is actually indicate that section for the octet, shall we say, for the device. Now in the network, 192.168.16, this network, how many devices available? There's actually from 25, the numbers available from 0 to 255, and but we cannot use 0, we cannot use 255, and we only valid address is from 1 to 254. Now let's say we have devices, a laptop, a server, and a desktop machines, that's a printers. They all had a IP address 192.168.16.12.14.16.21. Those devices should be able to communicate each other. What we need is actually a switch. So all the devices plug into switch, then they should be communicate each other. Now let's say we have one server here. This server with IP address 172.16.21.3. This is actually a different subnet. So when the device physically connect to this switch, this device physically connected, but it won't be able to communicate with device A or this server or this printers because they're not in the same network. What we need to do is actually we have to put into these devices in another network, another switch, and in the middle we have to add a router. So what's a router doing here? The router actually routes the different traffic from different subnets. So we have a subnet 172.116.21.0. Another subnet is 102.168.16.0. And between these two networks, the router is actually doing routing functionalities. So if we have a phone here, the phone can actually communicate the phone here through this router. Now, a router, apart from routing function, also in our IP PBX system, it also provides register the phones and routing the calls. So a router, apart from the IP routing, it also provide IP PBX. Of course, those actually have to configure later. This is actually the difference between a router and a switch and what's the role they play in our network. Next section we're going to move on is talk about some components in a router and a switch. Those components, to understand them, will make it easier for us to configure routers for switch in next step. So we're going to discuss the flash and NVRAM, RAN, and a RAM. That's all the components inside of any Cisco router and a switch. So let's start. So let's say we have a router, a power on. And a router is just the same as any computers, it will start with we call post power on self test. And then once ready, no any issue with devices, you were going to ask for ROS. Where's ROS? Operating system. Now this ROS is actually installed on a flash cards. Now what's a flash cards? We can have a look on this router. This is actually Cisco flash cards. It's provided 64 meg capacities. If let's say we cannot find the ROS on this flash, what happens? The router will move into a ROM. This is small chips on the system. It will actually kept a simplified ROS. So at least the system can routing to the ROM and also provide you the access to do some basic troubleshooting or updates ROS if needed. Let's say in our environment, the ROS actually being set up, it being uploaded properly, so the router decompressed the ROS image and everything's running okay. Next one we're going to do is actually looking for a configure file. We call it a start configure file. Now this start config file is actually inside of a NVRAM. Now once we have the start config file uploaded to RAM, random access memory, then the system ready for process. Now we normally, let's say this is brand new, so you have a PC here with a console port connect to the router, and then we do configure. Let's say we do the configure interface, we configure name. All this information will be in the RAM, and those file, this particular file, we call running configure. Running configure. Okay. Now, let's say at the moment, after you type the configure interface and change the names, and the switch for the router for some reason being power circled, what happens? All this information will be disappeared, because when the router reboot again, it will go through the process and then go back to upload this start config file, and those information actually not inside yet. So in order to save them, what we do actually in your console, you have to type a command, copy running whatever running file to configure file to startup configure, and you can just type copy run star instead of running configure start configure. That's okay. So this is actually very simple but very important command. When we move on to the following section to configure the Cisco switch and router, we always have to go back to issue the copy run star in order to save all the file for next reboot. Now let's have a break, and when we come back, we will move on to another exciting session, configure Cisco router and a switch. So see you shortly.